Before swords clashed in the forests of Gaul, before legions marched through rivers and over mountains, before Caesar crossed the Rubicon and ended a republic, there was ambition. Not just any ambition, but the cold, calculated drive of one man who saw opportunity where others saw danger. Julius Caesar's Gallic War was not merely a military campaign. It was a transformational moment that reshaped Rome, destroyed ancient cultures, and set the foundation for an empire that would endure for centuries. This is not a tale of one battle, one tribe, or one region. This is a story of two worlds colliding, of Rome, the steel-hearted republic teetering on the edge of dictatorship, and of Gaul, a land of proud tribal nations, fierce warriors, and ancient traditions. To understand the Gallic War, we must first understand the stage on which it was set. By the mid-1st century BC, the Roman Republic was a paradox, strong and fragile, rich and restless, expanding abroad but crumbling at home. It had conquered the known Mediterranean world, but could no longer control itself. Internally, Rome was racked by class conflict. The Senate, dominated by aristocrats, was increasingly out of touch with the needs of Rome's lower classes. Grain shortages, land disputes, and economic inequality had led to decades of social unrest. The populares, politicians who claimed to represent the people, used fiery rhetoric and public anger to gain power, while the optimates, the old conservative elite, clung desperately to tradition. In this toxic environment, military leaders became more than generals. They became political players. Marius, Sulla, Pompey, each had used the loyalty of their troops to challenge the state, and Julius Caesar would become the most dangerous of them all. But in 59 BC, Caesar was not yet the dictator history would remember. He had just served as consul, had amassed debts so enormous that creditors feared he might flee, and had secured a position as governor of Cisalpine Gaul, Illyricum, and Transalpine Gaul. It was here, in the provinces north of Italy, that Caesar found his answer. He needed money, glory, and a loyal army. Gaul offered all three. To the Romans, Gaul was a land of barbarians, uncivilized, savage, and dangerous. But this was propaganda more than fact. Gaul, or Gallia as the Romans called it, was a vast region stretching from the Alps to the Atlantic, from the Rhine to the Pyrenees. It was home to dozens of Celtic tribes, each with its own language, dialect, customs, and political structures. Some tribes lived in large hill fort cities called oppida, with walls, trade systems, and coinage. Others were semi-nomadic, built around warrior elites and oral tradition. Religion was central to Gallic life. Druids served as priests, judges, and philosophers. They held enormous sway over tribal decisions and were keepers of sacred knowledge, often passed down orally. The Gauls worshipped a complex pantheon of gods, many of them tied to nature, war, and the afterlife. Their society was not anarchic, but hierarchical. Chieftains ruled clans, confederations formed loose alliances, and tribal assemblies sometimes convened to make decisions in times of danger. But this political diversity, while culturally rich, was also a weakness. There was no centralized authority in Gaul, no single king or government to coordinate resistance, and Caesar exploited this to devastating effect. The Romans had long feared the Gauls. In 390 BC, a Gallic army had sacked Rome, burning much of the city and leaving psychological scars that endured for centuries. Though the Roman military evolved and expanded, the image of Gauls as a looming northern threat remained deeply embedded in Roman identity. By Caesar's time, some Gallic tribes were trading partners and Roman allies. Others were openly hostile or raiding Roman territory. The situation was unstable and volatile, exactly the kind of environment Caesar needed to justify military intervention. In 58 BC, the Helvetii, a large Gallic tribe from what is now Switzerland, attempted to migrate westward through Roman-controlled territory. Caesar, claiming to defend Rome's allies, refused their request and intercepted their movement. This conflict gave Caesar his opening, the Battle of Bibracte. The Roman victory allowed him to portray himself as the savior of Rome's borders, while also earning plunder, slaves, and prestige. From there, he marched deeper into Gaul. What followed was not a limited campaign, but an ever-expanding war of conquest. Year after year, Caesar pushed further into Gaul, claiming new threats, protecting new allies, and always expanding his reach. He defeated the powerful Germanic king Ariovistus. He fought the Belgae in the north, subdued the Veneti along the Atlantic coast, and clashed with the Eburones and Nervii in the forests of Belgica. Each campaign brought more glory and more brutality. Cities were besieged and destroyed. Defeated tribes were sold into slavery or annihilated. Thousands were killed. Caesar himself bragged of exterminating entire tribes. At the same time, he wrote extensively about the war in his Commentari de Bello Gallico, a third-person account that cast him as a calm, logical commander fighting to defend Roman interests. These commentaries were sent back to Rome and read aloud to the public, becoming one of the most effective pieces of political propaganda in ancient history. Caesar wasn't just fighting the Gauls, he was building his myth. At first, the Roman Senate celebrated Caesar's victories. He was enriching the Republic with loot, securing the frontiers, and winning glory. But as his popularity grew, and as news of his vast and loyal army spread, his political enemies grew nervous. Caesar was becoming too powerful. He ignored Senate orders, stayed in Gaul longer than authorized, and began maneuvering for political dominance back home. His alliances in Rome began to crumble. His relationship with Pompey, once his closest political partner, deteriorated into rivalry. But Caesar had what no one else had, an army that would follow him to the ends of the earth. By 52 BC, after nearly 7 years of brutal campaigning, Caesar faced his greatest challenge, a united Gallic uprising led by a charismatic chieftain named Vercingetorix. This climax of the Gallic War, the Siege of Alesia, would test Caesar's genius and ruthlessness like never before. But that's a story for another chapter. What matters here is understanding what Caesar's conquest of Gaul meant. First, it made him fabulously wealthy. The spoils of war filled his coffers and erased his debts. Second, it gave him an army personally loyal to him, not to the Senate. Third, it made him a legend, a man capable of taming the wild north, defeating barbarian kings, and securing the Roman world. But the cost was staggering. Ancient estimates suggest over 1 million Gauls died. Another 1 million were enslaved. Tribal cultures were destroyed. Languages vanished. Sacred forests were cut down. The Druids, once the heartbeat of Gallic culture, were systematically eliminated. It was nothing short of cultural erasure. And it was done in the name of order, of civilization, of Rome. By the time Caesar returned to Rome, he was no longer a general. He was a political force unlike anything the Republic had seen. The Gallic War had given him more than military power. It had given him narrative control. He crossed the Rubicon in 49 BC, not as a rebel, but as a conqueror bringing justice to a broken republic. Civil war followed, the Senate fled, Pompey fell, and Caesar, the man who began as governor of Gaul, declared himself dictator for life. The war in Gaul was the hinge of Roman history. It was the moment when military success overtook political tradition, when personal glory trumped civic duty, and when one man's ambition reshaped the Western world. We study the Gallic War not just to recount military victories, but to understand how empires are born and how they die. Caesar's conquest of Gaul teaches us about propaganda, about imperialism, about the dangers of charismatic leadership, and the fragility of democratic institutions. It teaches us that power, once seized, is rarely given back. Today, ruins of Gallic cities lie buried beneath European towns. Their names survive only in fragments. Their gods are forgotten. Their resistance, heroic but scattered, could not withstand the machine of Roman conquest. But their story lives in Caesar's writings, in the bones unearthed by archaeologists, and in the questions we still ask. Was Caesar a hero or a tyrant, a unifier or a destroyer, a genius or a monster? Perhaps he was all of them. This is where it begins, not with a battle, but with a hunger. The hunger for glory, the hunger for power, the hunger to be remembered. The Gallic War was Caesar's answer to all three, and history would never be the same again.